So good morning everyone, and I welcome you all on today's webinar, The Basics of Chromatography and Understanding of HPLC. This topic is very relevant to the industry practices and especially those people who want to go in the QC or the analytical department, or also the people who are new in the analytical department. It will really help them. It will help them to understand the basics of chromatography. So before we begin our webinar, just to have a background of Chariot Consultants, why Chariot Consultants came into existence. Because we believe, as per our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Modi, the more we give importance to skill development, the more competent will be our youth. So that is our main motive. We want to make our fresh people who are going to be as a part of pharmaceutical industry, or they are going to be a part of entrepreneur, or they also for the academic people who want to be self-relevant and they want to teach the exact teaching methodologies to the students with whatever it is happening in the pharmaceutical industry. So basically, we as a charity consultant are dedicated to provide the best knowledge to the students, even to the academic people, and also the people who are new in the pharmaceutical industry, that how the industry works, and it is a kind of knowledge sharing. Now, when we talk about skill development, why the skill development is important, and we all know that most of the skill intensive industries, they are the major contributors of your GDP, and more the skill development will be there in our country, the more GDP will increase. And yes, we can say that we can become Atmanirbhar Bharat. And if you see the trend of most of the developing countries, or the most developed countries such as Brazil, China, Germany, Switzerland, UK, Canada, US, Japan, South Korea. So most of their GDP or most of their people, they are mostly skilled, and almost 50 to 90% people are skilled. That is why they are having a major contribution to their GDP. Whereas in India, the skill force is less than 5%, which is not even significant. So the background is that you are having your degrees. I believe most of the people would have been in the final year of the bachelor's. Most of the people are from masters. Most of the people may be in the academics, and some may be in the research. They have their degrees, but what we believe, there is a gap between the academics and the industry, so that we need to flourish the skill, so that you can benefit the people around you, the country around you, and your company also. So that is our main motive, and that is why the Chariot Consultant comes into existence. Now, talking about our journey, where we are very short family, and we have a very just we have started in the month of June, in which we gave our first webinar. Maybe you must have attended, or maybe there will be some people who were not there in the webinar. But on July, today we have completed almost 1 month, and between this tenure we have almost done 4 webinars, and these webinars are very selective. If you talk about our selection of the webinars and the topics that we discuss in the webinars, they are mostly industry relevant. So it will not only help you as a fresher, but also the academic people who want to teach their students, they want to give them the right path. So that is why in this tenure of 1 month, we have given 4 webinars. First of all, it was the basic of generic development, how the generic product development is, the cycle is done from the lab to the commercial scale, followed by the regulatory aspects, where Mr. Lalit Mohan gave a very good presentation on the regulatory affairs and the current practices which are there as per the industry trends. And today, as a part of our commitment, we have Mr. Dibyaranjan Sahu, who will be discussing about the basics of chromatography and understanding of HPLC. We have also created a YouTube channel in which every webinar that we are discussing about, it will be there on the channel. So you can just go on. If you are not able to attend the webinars, the previous ones, we have uploaded those videos on our YouTube channel. The name of the channel is Chariot Consultants. So you can see, I mean, in terms of, you talk about QBD, most of the, if you talk about in YouTube, most of the relevant is not there as per the pharma industry. So we have uploaded a complete video of around 1.5 hours, in which we have discussed each and every step of quality by design, which is absolutely free. You can just go on, you can learn at home, anywhere. It is up to you. It is very flexible. You can go and you can watch the videos, and also any upcoming events that will be there, we will be uploading those videos. So please go and subscribe our channel, and also if it will be very appreciated if you can just share to your colleagues or your friends, so that the knowledge can be shared. Our main motive is to just enlighten the people in terms of their knowledge enhancement. And today we have Mr. Dibyaranjan Sahu, who is currently a principal scientist in Impact Scientific, and he is taking care of the analytical method development team as well as the validation. He is an out of the box thinker and he's a very talented scientist. Currently, he is working with Impact Scientific, but his previous organizations were Kusum Healthcare, which is in Rajasthan, Bhiwadi, and Prochem. And also, he has been associated with CSIR, and also some research work he has done in collaboration with Jamia Hamdard. So, I believe he is a very talented scientist. And today, whatever he will be discussing, I believe that you should listen it carefully. It will really change your thought process, how the HPLC and chromatography things work. Talking about his achievements, he is a topper in university in the academic year of 2009, and also he achieved 56th rank at all Orissa Rhenanium chemistry competition. He has many international publications with him. Around he has more than 9 publications, international publications with him, and also he is a part of uh, journal referee for 5 international journals. And this was the professional aspect. In terms of, you say, in his personal life, he is a social service. He provides social service to the community, and also he is a very good singer. So I welcome Mr. Dibyaranjan Sahu. So you can just continue, and I wish all the best. And I hope the people who are there sitting at their home, they can listen and they can just inculcate these informative information from Mr. Dibyaranjan Sahu. So Dibyaranjan, it is all up to you now. You can continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Himanshu, for such a nice introduction. And surely, this seminar will be a great boon to all the people who are working in analytical field. And hope I will meet up their expectation. So we'll start with the basics of chromatography. I think everyone who is associated with us, they know about chromatography and how it is and why it is being done, and also will understand about the instrumentation. So our main fact will be understanding the HPLC, because chromatography, I think everyone would have read about the textbook. In textbook, they have seen many kinds of chromatography are there. So basically, we'll just see the basics of chromatography, what we have learned in our academic books. So we'll start with that. So basically, we'll start with chromatography and its techniques. So what is chromatography? Just a simple explanation. Chroma means color, and graphy means to write. So we have to it was developed by Michael Sweat, and he has started with the pigments or leaf pigments. So he has started with that, and he got some separations, so some color differentiation in his column chromatography. So he has developed that thing and named it chromatography. So in the year started with, we'll start with the paper chromatography, thin layer chromatography. There are different varieties of chromatographic techniques. So paper chromatography, thin layer chromatography, they comes under planar chromatography. We say it planar chromatography. We'll talk later with that. Then column chromatography. Then within this column chromatography, we have high performance liquid chromatography, ultra pressure UPLC, and UHPLC also is there. I've skipped that thing. And gas chromatography, affinity chromatography, ion exchange chromatography, size exclusion chromatography. Under size exclusion chromatography, there are two things, that is GPC, gel permeation chromatography, and gel filtration chromatography. And currently, it is not being it is used in India. There are some few companies who are using, like Mylan, like your Syngene, they are using supercritical fluid chromatography. So this is a new technique which where we will not be losing solvents. So in detail, I will get back to you later with this. So we'll start with our main concern will be on HPLC, high performance liquid chromatography, as it is widely used in industries, and also this is a great technique. So now we have gone to UPLC also. After HPLC, we are going to high pressure, ultra pressure. That is a high pressure liquid chromatography. It operates at a range of around 5,000, 6,000 psi maximum. So in ultra pressure chromatography, we go up to a pressure limit of 15,000 psi. So just a small example, like in your bike tires or your car tires, there will be pressure of around 25 psi only. So here we operate at 5,000 psi. Means at this pressure, if you are kicking an elephant also, it will go up to some kilometers. So at this pressure, we'll be working here. So why that pressure is needed in chromatography? So we'll talk about that in our slides. So just the chromatographic terms you might have heard about. Analyte. Analyte means the substance which will be the compounds which is need to be tested or which is need to be separated. Similarly, the chromatograms. Okay, so chromatogram is the visual output, means the recording after it is coming after detection. What is recorded in a graph format, that is called as chromatogram. So eluate means the mobile phase which we are passing through the columns, passing through the system and the columns, and it is coming out to the waste. That is called eluate. And eluent is the ratio or proportion in which our compound comes out, and that is we call as eluents. And detector is what records our samples. So there are various types of detectors, and we'll talk about it in our slides. So coming to the just a minute for the interruption. So this is the flowchart diagram of chromatography. So basic principles of chromatography is adsorption and partition. So we have two different principles for this chromatography. So for adsorption, there will be the solid particles, the stationary phase. There will be competition between solid, stationary phase, and your gas or liquid. And in the case of gas, it goes to gas chromatography. In the case of liquid, it goes to HPLC, UPLC, and all these things. So in liquid, we have column chromatography and thin layer chromatography. Thin layer chromatography, also we can put up more things here, like HPLC, UPLC, they all category of adsorption only. And in partition also, there will be a liquid and a liquid support. So a liquid and a liquid support. So we have to, in gas also, in liquid also, liquid separation, that goes on partition. So here also we have the column chromatography as well as paper chromatography as well as thin layer chromatography. So what is adsorption chromatography? So adsorption chromatography means your solid support is there, and within that solid support, the solute or your analyte will bind to the solid support according to the affinity or according to the pore size or surface area of the adsorption. So that we call at absorption chromatography. And so in simple terms, you can tell that it is
Can you just make the full screen?
yeah. So it is the process of separation of components in a mixture with the adsorption of stationary phase present in the means the chromatographic. Yeah. So it is the separation of the components which are according to the separated according to the pore size, according to the surface of the surface area of the stationary phases. Same, the equilibration also between the mobile and stationary phase accounts for the separation of different solutes. So there is a equilibration that is created between a stationary phase and the solute. So within that, there is a absorption of the component onto the stationary phase, and we can just elute the solute according to that. And second thing is that for partition chromatography. So partition chromatography is this is the separation, that is difference between the solubility of components in the mobile and the stationary phase. Suppose there is a solid support. So when you put your mobile phase, the mobile phase goes to the pores of the solid stationary phases. So there it creates a layer above the stationary phases, and the mobile phase also contains the analyte. So when that analyte comes, okay, so there will be a partitioning between the liquid and liquid partitioning. So there will be a liquid layer. You can see my cursor, I am moving. There is a liquid layer here. So this liquid layer, and this is our solid particles. This is the mobile phase. So there will be a partitioning between your this and this phase and this phase. So there will be partitioning, and that is called partition chromatography. In this also, your chromatographic principle also depends on these layers. This also. So I think this you have studied in your textbooks. So basic clearance on. Then there are different types of chromatography like solid liquid chromatography. We are going for HPLCs. So it's a mobile phase will be liquid and the stationary phase will be solid. Okay, so there are two types of solid liquid chromatography. One is reverse phase chromatography, another one is normal phase chromatography. Okay, so normal phase chromatography has a stationary phase of polar stationary phase, that is silica. Silica normally is our polar stationary phases, that is a polar molecule. So upon that we coat with C18 or some non-polar like carbon compound C18, or we coat with zirconium. Okay, so they form a non-polar component. So that we use in the reverse phase. So our in normal phase, be clear that in normal phase our mobile phase is non-polar and our stationary phase is polar. And in reverse phase we have our stationary phase is non-polar and mobile phase is polar. Okay, so liquid chromatography, it can be done in a plane like your thin layer chromatography. That is a normal phase chromatography. There we use solvents like chloroform, hexane. These are all used in there. And in reverse phase chromatography, our mobile phase is polar. So water we are used. So now basically we carry out reverse phase chromatography in industries. It's because the cost is very low as we use aqueous buffers, aqueous phases there. So that's why we are using reverse phase chromatography mostly in our industries. And normal phase is also used for specifically polar components and all. And coming to the next slide. There is a liquid gas chromatography. Also, the liquid gas chromatography, our gas will be the stationary phase. Okay, sorry, gas will be the mobile phase. Okay, that will be the carrier gas, what we are calling the carrier gas. That can be nitrogen, helium. Okay, they can be used for as a carrier gas. Argon also is used. So cost effective is nitrogen, and also we are using air also in that. Second thing is that the stationary phase is complete a liquid that is fixed on a solid support. Okay, that is a wax kind of materials, so that can be fixed on the solid support. Okay, so there we can carry out the liquid gas chromatography. So this will be a separate chapter. We are not including this liquid gas chromatography here in this seminar. So we can carry out a different webinar for that. So there will be liquid chromatography also. These are also not properly used in our case because this is the not a sensitive technique, and there will be very much disturbances. It will be a liquid mobile phase as well as a liquid stationary phases. So both the phases will be immiscible, okay, or insoluble. So there will be mostly the partition chromatography depends on this liquid chromatography. So basically these are not used. Thus the basics I want to say you that there are different kinds of chromatography. This is planar chromatography. So in planar chromatography we have two things, that is paper chromatography and thin layer chromatography. So normally this paper chromatography and thin layer chromatography, previously at the starting of chromatography they are used, but now thin layer chromatography is used in synthetic labs, and also we are also using thin layer chromatography in our analytical labs also. Also in preparative thin layer chromatography is also there. There is a new, that is the technique in which we extract the compounds on preparative chromatographies. So it depends on the retention factors of the substances as per the mobile phase, how it moves. So we'll talk about this thing later. So basically our topic of study is column chromatography. So what is column chromatography? So the stationary phase will be a solid particle, maybe a silica or a coated silica, that is C18, or your non-polar silica. So normally in development, like for extraction, isolation of compounds in from natural products or enzymes or proteins, these we use mostly column chromatography in lab scale. But in industries, we use column chromatography in the way of preparative chromatography. Or preparative chromatography is the same, it is like column chromatography only, the dia will be like that. So everything will be that like that only, but it will be operating at a pressure. But in column chromatography, what we are doing in labs and all, so they are using gravitational force as the pressure. So there are different ways of doing that thing. So in column chromatography, that it may be of glass or it may be of stainless steel, which is packed with silica completely. And we put and load the compound at the top, and then the mobile phase will put at the top and wait for the separation, that the mobile phase come down. So there are two things, that first, in column chromatography, when we put the mobile phase on the top, okay, it takes the gravitation to come down, okay. And in preparative or in HPLC, we put a pressure to move the mobile phase down with the solids. So this increases the selectivity, this increases the resolution, this increases the efficiency of the column. So better separation we observe when we put pressure. So coming to high performance liquid chromatography, HPLC, so how it works. So this is the solvent, what we are talking of, mobile phase. Okay, so this mobile phase will be at the top, and now there are many companies like Waters, Agilent. They are using two types of things, like one, gravitation. So they put the mobile phase at the top of the system. So with gravitation, there will be capillary flow. Okay, so when this solvent comes here, and then it goes to a pump. Okay, so there are many things like mobile phase, degasser, pump, injector, columns, detector, and software. So we'll come one by one on this. So mobile phase. So mobile phase can be polar mobile phase also, and non-polar mobile phase also. So polar mobile phase, when we say polar mobile phase, it means that we have aqueous buffer, okay, aqueous mobile phases, which is constantly mainly of water buffer. So non-polar mobile phases means hexane, heptane, according to the polarity. Chloroform we can use. And normally I've listed out the common reverse phase mobile phase buffers only. And but normal phase, as it is very few, used less, so we are not. I have not put it, but your hexane, heptane we can use as normal mobile phases. So degasser, what is the role of degasser? So degasser plays a role in removing the air bubbles, because if a air bubble comes in the system, then at a certain high pressure there will be complete pressure and there will be vacuum created inside. With this vacuum, our chromatography will be hampered, because there will be fluctuation in the pressures. When if our any kind of bubbles or air particles comes inside, so there will be completely fluctuation in pressure, which will impact the chromatography. So degasser has been used to just remove the air bubbles or air particles. We can use sonications also. Sonication we used, but after that also, while mixing, degassers are used, because to remove very minute air particles which we are not able to see also. So next thing is pump. So pump, we are using pump means pump. There are two types of pump. We have heard about binary, quaternary. So what is the difference between binary and quaternary pumps? So just in short, binary pump is a two solvent pump. So there will be individual pumps for sucking the solvents from channel A and channel B. There are two channels, channel A and channel B. Channel A contain one mobile phase, channel B contain the other mobile phase. So normally in channel A, we work with aqueous buffers, like aqueous phases, we work with there. So we can place the buffers over there. There are various kinds of buffers. I will come of what are buffers and how we are using, why we are using buffers. So I will come in the later slides. So basically pumps, there are binary pumps. So A pump, we are putting mostly aqueous things, and B pump, we are putting organic things. Organic means your acetonitrile, methanol, we are putting that thing. So the solvents from A and the solvents from B are being sucked by two different pumps. So that's why we call it binary pump, and at a time they are pulled out. Okay. So from pump A, it will come, and from pump B also it will come at a time. Suppose a ratio of 70:30. So from pump A, or in a 1 ml flow, so in pump A, it will come at 0.7 ml per minute, and from pump B, it will come at 0.3 ml per minute. So total 1 ml per minute it will come. So we are getting that thing. So it is a binary pump. Quaternary pump, it is a single pump only. In quaternary pump, it is only a single pump, okay, in which there are 4 channels we can use. So we are named it quaternary. 4 channels means 4 solvents we can use at a time. So solvent A, as we put your aqueous things. Solvent B, in a channel B, we will put your organic phases. Solvent 3, normally we put washing solutions, and in solvent D, normally we put injection. So there are the components like injector. So injector, what is the thing is, in injector there are loops also, like 100 microliter, 200 microliter, 500 microliter, 1000 microliter. In preparative HPLC there are about 1000 microliter loops. So this we can fit it. Normally what are used in industries, they are 100 microliter loops are used in injectors. So the injector's needle has to be washed frequently. So in quaternary pumps, so we have a channel for injector washing. So we put that channel in channel D solvent, where the injector needle will be washed periodically. Before injection, after injection, that will be washed completely. Then in channel C, we put column washing solvents. Column washing solvent means in which our column need to be washed after analysis. Okay. Normally we work with A and B. We can also work with A, B, and C also. 3 things we can put, 3 things we can work with. But normally we work with A and B mobile phases, and C we keep for washing solvents, and D we keep for our injection needle wash. So, or seal wash. Seal wash is there also. In the pump there are seals also. So that seal need to be washed frequently. So that seal will be washed. In seal wash we keep at D, injector needles we keep at D channel. So in quaternary pumps, what happens? All the solvents, 4 solvents, they are coming at a time to a mixer. Okay, there is a mixture that is called proportionate valve mixture. That is a proportionate valve. So that is called as gradient proportionate valve or proportionate valve, in which 4 channels from A, B, C, and D. If we are using 4 channels, 25%, 25%, 25%, 25% as a mobile phase also. So from 4 channels, it will come at a time. At a time, it will come to gradient proportionate valve. The valves will open for the 4 channels at a rate of 25%. Then there will be, after mixing, that will go to a mixer that is placed just before the pump, or after the pump also it is placed in some systems. So in the pump, it will come to the pump head. The pump head plunger, it will just pull the solvents, and then it will force the solvents to the system. So there are, this proportionate valves plays an important role in quaternary pumps. Okay, so these are about pumps. I have talked about injectors. So next we'll go to columns. So how many types of columns are there? So normally I said about that there are, the columns normally is called as stationary phases. So there are different phases of columns, the different stationary phases according to our molecule, what molecule we are using. Suppose we are using highly polar molecule. So if we are using highly polar molecule, so for that reason we will take polar mobile phases, for polar stationary phases, so that the interaction will be more and we can get the retention. Okay. Also for mid-polar and polar, some polar means slightly polar compounds, mid-polar compounds and non-polar compounds, we take our C18, that is non-polar stationary phases. So there are two types of stationary phases, that is polar stationary phases and non-polar stationary phases. So in polar stationary phases, I have listed out silica, it is a polar stationary phase. Diol is a polar stationary phase. Cyano is a polar stationary phase. Your phenyl is a polar stationary phase. But phenyl, cyano, amino, these three, they can be used in reverse phase also. Helic is also a polar, non-polar mobile stationary phase. There we can use non-polar solvents more in helic. So helic is a different chapter. So based on helic, it will be a long story of helic only. So C1, this all C, carbon, C1, C3, C4, C6, C8, C18, C30, aqua also, and phenyl hexyl. This all comes under your non-polar stationary phase, which are widely used. So normally C8 and C18 are widely used. These are widely used in analytical field. And also this, you might be seeing this PSDBB columns. These are for sugar molecules. This is a polystyrene divinyl benzene stationary phases. These are all for sugar molecules like your carbohydrates. So PSDBB lead, PSDBB sodium, PSDBB hydrogen is also there, H plus is also there. So these are all called sugar stationary phases for carbohydrate. There is also specific carbohydrate columns are also available. And these chiral stationary phases, these are different columns. This can work also in normal phases, and this can work also in reverse phase also currently. So normally previously in previous times we use chiral columns as a normal phase only, but now the technology has changed. Now we have chiral columns in reverse phase also. And detectors, we have various kind of detectors like UV, PDA. UV means ultraviolet, PDA means photodiode array detector, fluorescence detector, ELSD, evaporative light scattering detector, electrochemical detector, RI detector, refractive index, CAD, charged aerosol detectors, conductivity detectors. There are many detectors are there, but most frequently used are UV for normal analysis, and PDA is used most frequently for method developments initially, because PDA used to give so much of noise. So what is the difference between UV and PDA? Both work in the UV range only, but in PDA what we can do, we can analyze our analyte at different wavelengths at the same time. But UV, we have when we analyze either in dual mode, means two wavelengths at a time, or single wavelength at a time. But in PDA we can scan up to 200 nanometer to 400 nanometer, we can scan it. Okay, so fluorescence is for those compounds which give fluorescence, so we can detect with that. And ELSD we are detecting with for sugar molecules also we are using ELSD detectors. And electrochemical detectors, refractive index RI detectors can be used widely also, but RI detector, due to gradient programming, we cannot do with RI detector, so these have limited use. But previously the starting detectors were RI detector only when we started chromatography using instrumentation. So RI was the starting, then came the era of UV, which took over everything. Then softwares you will commonly find in industries, that is LC solution. It is from Simarju. Also Agilent also give LC solution. Lab solution is also for Simarju. Simarju are the instrument brands, like you know about Waters. There are a brand of Waters. There are a brand of Simarju. There are a brand of Agilent. Also Thermo is there. Also Dionex is there. There are many instruments, HPLC instruments. And with that instruments, we need software also. So with that softwares, we have LC solution softwares who are widely used. Lab solution also used. ChemStation is there for Agilent. Empower is there for Waters, Simarju. So these all softwares we will find in the industries. Then we'll look after the common terms used in chromatography. What are the terms you will come across in chromatography? You can see a chromatogram just below. So this is a typical chromatogram separating two peaks. Okay, so first one is dual volume. So what is the dual volume? Dual volume is the delay volume, what we say, that is from the point of mixing. I told about previously that after the quaternary pump there will be a proportionating valve. Okay, after the proportionating valve there will be a mixer. Okay, where the four things will be mixed properly. Okay, so from that mixer to the column, okay, where the column is attached. So just I will show you. Like from pump, it will come to injector. There will be continuous flow of this mobile phase completely. So injector will be different at the side. So there will be continuous flow. There will be no air inside. There will be continuous flow here. So after the pump, when it comes to column here, so from the pump here, there will be a mixer. From the mixer to the column end here, till here, it is called as the delay. This volume, inside there will be capillary. This capillary volume will be called as your dual volume. Okay. So we call this dual volume. This is effectively needed as the system will have less dual volume. There will be more efficiency of the system. And we want that the system should have less dual volume. Okay. So UPLC, I talked about UPLC, ultra pressure liquid chromatography, and HPLC. So in ultra pressure liquid chromatography, so their dual volume is very less, some few microliters, 0.5, 0.6 microliters. But in HPLC, we have around 1.2, 1.3 microliters of dual volume. So from this column, it will go to detector, then it will go to your waste. This from this detector, this in the software, the data will be recorded here. So this is called as dual volume, and you can measure also the dual volume here also. You can see that this is the injection. When we'll inject, the chromatogram start reads in the chromatographic system in the software. So from here, the injection, when we will put the injection, from there it starts. Then you can see a peak here. So this is the air peak. Air peak means this is the peak of the dual volume, that when the column, when the mobile phase enters the column, or any unreturned compounds. That also we can say that any unreturned compound. Suppose in a non-polar mobile phase, we use a highly polar compound. So it will not stick to the mobile phase, because like attracts like, because non-polar attracts non-polar molecules more, or mid-polar molecules. Okay, but it won't attract your polar molecules. So your highly polar molecules, this will evolve at the beginning only. So that is an unwritten compound that does not retain in the column. So that compound where it ejects, we call it as Tm or T0, we can call it. Okay, at time 0 it is coming. So this is the air peak. So this we can call out that this from there here to here, it is the dual volume. Okay, so second one is the hold up time. So it is the time required for elution of an unwritten compound. So this we can call it hold up time, like Tm we can call it. Okay, so this is the first solvent peak what we are getting. Anything in acetonitrile you are getting, in mobile methanol you will be getting this kind of solvent peaks. Or this is a chromatogram of actually GC. This is a GC chromatogram. This is not a HPLC chromatogram. That's why we get a solvent peak such high peaks. But in HPLC will not get such a high peak as a solvent peak. You will get solvent peak, but it will be very less. Okay, so here are two peaks. I will come to the next slide, then I'll show you. So this is hold up volume. Hold up volume means the unwritten compound when it comes out. Okay, that will come out some minutes at a flow rate, certain flow rate. So we can calculate the hold up volume as Vm is equal to Tm into F. So Tm will be the unwritten compound minutes into F is the flow rate. So we can calculate how much volume is required for that thing, for coming out of that compound. Second thing is the retention time. So when our analyte comes out, at what minutes it comes out, because you can see here, this is the detector response. It will be in millivolts or atomic unit, it will be there. And this one will be the time. It will be in minutes. Okay, so it will be in minutes. So here we can see retention time at which the analyte elutes, that is called the retention time. So here you can see that suppose it is coming at 3 or 4 minutes. So this will be the retention time of this peak, 3 or 4 minutes. So I'll come to you later with a typical chromatogram. So then theoretical plates. So what is theoretical plate? Theoretical plate is column efficiency. So column efficiency, it means that for a Gaussian peak, okay, the column efficiency is calculated as n is equal to 16 TR, means retention time of the substance, by width. W is the width of the peak. This is the width of the peak. So we can calculate by retention time of the peak divided by width of the peak whole square into 16. It will give you the, and this formula is according to USP, and according to BP it will be n is equal to 5.54 into TR by this width is complete width, means W, this width at the base. Okay, so in as per EP or as per BP, British Pharmacopoeia or European Pharmacopoeia or Japanese Pharmacopoeia, they calculate, or our softwares also, they calculate from W half, width at half the peak height, this one. So from there we can calculate this n is equal to 5.54 into TR by W half, width at that point whole square. So that will give you theoretical plates. Also in your textbooks you have come across HETP value. So height equivalent to the theoretical plates. So as the HETP will be lower, okay, so our column equivalent, the theoretical plate number will be high, n is equal to L by N. Okay, HETP is equal to L by N. Length is length by your theoretical plates. How many theoretical plates are there? So it is inversely proportional. Your HETP value will be lower, then your efficiency will be high. Theoretical plates will be high. And why we need these theoretical plates? The theoretical plates tells about the columns efficiency, means how the column is well packed. So we need more and more plates for that. Okay, it's, you can see about the packing of something, some material. Okay, we can pack it if our height is very less. Suppose washers you have seen in vehicles, you have seen washers. So there are small washers also and there are nuts also. If we put nuts in a tube, okay, if we put nuts in a tube, cylindrical tube, we'll put some nuts directly. So that nuts will come, means the nuts height are more as compared to the washer height. So if we put, how many nuts we can put in a tube length of 1 meter, and same how many washers we can fit it there. So what will be more tightly packed? I think the washers what we are putting, that will be more tightly packed than the nuts, because it will be loose because the height are more. So like that in columns also we are putting the same thing. Okay, so in columns also we need more plates. The packing should be more efficient. Okay. Also there are Van Demeter equation is there for this, also for column efficiency, that I'm not covering here. That will be a different chapter. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Dibyaranjan, there is one question from Ashwini Tanpure, that what is Gaussian peak? She is asking.
okay, sure. So Gaussian peak is that a symmetrical peak. Okay, so symmetrical peak means, see, this one is a Gaussian peak. Okay, it is a symmetrical peak. At the point when you will divide it into half, it will be symmetrically distributed. Okay, that is called as a Gaussian peak. And next, when you are called a non-Gaussian peak, like you will see, I'll show you in next slides how a non-Gaussian peaks also look like. So this is what. So normally, I'll show you that there is a resolution. Okay, so there is a parameter called resolution. Resolution means peak separation. What we commonly use term is peak separation, separation of both the peaks. So when we separate both the peaks, okay, so there should be a certain resolution according to your pharmacopoeial guidelines. So pharmacopoeial guidelines, that there should be a resolution of minimum 2 between 2 peaks, so that we can easily quantify it. Because suppose one peak is coming here and one peak is merging here, so we cannot quantify that both the peaks, because we cannot integrate it properly. Okay, so that's why there are certain things what we say, that when we need a proper resolution between the two peaks to quantify the peaks, quantify the components. So suppose there are no resolution between two peaks. Suppose there are very closely eluting isomers. There are isomers, they elute they have nearly, they have the same mass balance, okay, near about same structure. They only vary in their positional things, positional isomers. There are many kinds of isomers, diastereomers, stereoisomers. So what happens that if their molecule, because the chromatography separates on the basis of adsorption and partition. Okay, so there will be the selectivity will be only on that thing only. Okay, your surface area, pore size. So they cannot position, like positional isomers, they cannot be separated well in a normal chromatography. They can now, there are specific columns we can separate that thing. Also we can do with gradient method, we can separate that thing. But suppose there are nothing, there are two isomers, what we cannot separate, but they are closely eluted. Suppose they are closely, based on the separations also, they are closely eluted. So we also need to give certain criteria for that also. So for that reason, we have the peak to valley ratio. These are given by the pharmacopoeias. So peak to valley ratio is, see, this peak, two peaks are merged. So this easily cannot be quantified. So this basically, if when we are separating this, both the things, so there, this is the peak height, small peak height. So we'll calculate the peak height and this one, where the peak separates. Okay. So HP by HB, this value we have to give. Okay, for in our system suitability parameters. So I'll talk to you what are system suitability parameters later. So you just remember that there is a term also called peak to valley ratio. Okay. So this is your HP by HV. So the smaller peak height by the difference in the height of two peaks. So that will be your HP by HV will be by V value. Okay, just remember the terms. Okay, I am not going in detail of this. So, and there is relative retention. So relative retention is the retention of the components you want with respect to a other component. Suppose you are injecting a standard component, okay, and you are getting another peak also. So with reference to that, you have to give one retention time. So basically in chromatography, this RRT is very important. This will call as RRT, that is relative retention time. So this is very important, as if you are using two varieties of columns, like there are many varieties of stationary phases from different brands, different companies. So if you are using two varieties from different companies, so they maybe vary in retention time. What we talk about the time at which our analyte elutes. Okay, they may vary with that, but this RRT will not vary with respect to any reference thing. So we normally use internal standards also for these things also. Also, we can calculate from your T0. We can do it from T0 also. So this RRT is most important. I will show you in this chromatogram that suppose you are going to find the RRT of this peak. So suppose this is your reference peak. Okay. So this peak retention time divided by this peak retention time will be your RRT of this peak. Okay. So that will come. This is RRT. That is very important parameter. And second is resolution, which I have already talked about. So this is the formula, you can write it. So this is the retention time of the first component or second component minus the retention time of the first component, okay, divided by width of first peak plus width of second peak, okay, into 2. So this we can do resolutions. So this, you don't have to worry of this. This software always already calculates you, okay, and give it to you. Okay, just in industries, if anyone says about that, what is retention, what is RRT, what is this, so you should know that, yes, retention means retention, RT means retention time. Retention time means this is the elute peak. Okay, RRT means relative retention time with respect to this peak. So you do not need to calculate with pen and paper there, because software already calculates everything. I'm giving you the formula that if you want to know the basics of that, you can go and you can find it out. Okay. And the second is the retention factor, is also called capacity factor. This should be more than 2 for any peak. K should be more than 2 for any peak, because to give a good resolution. Also in industries we use that K is equal to 1 also we can use, but normally we prefer that K should be more than 2 for a well chromatography. Okay, so this is the, you can remember it, capacity factor, retention factor. These are not commonly used also. Okay, but this is symmetry factor. This is also mostly used. Also we call as tailing factor. Okay, So you are saying previously you were saying about Gaussian peak and non-Gaussian peak. The Gaussian peak has a proper symmetry, okay, but this is a Gaussian peak, but you can see the symmetry. The symmetry is little bit wide here. So this we call as peak tail, because this is the tail of the peak. That is, it means when you see this in a chromatogram, you can see that your adsorption or your partition with the stationary phase is more. Okay, so that's why it is not eluting properly. So it is being held by your, the compound is held by your stationary phase. So it is not eluting properly. So that's why the tail comes. Normally in our silica, there is SiOH, that is silanol group. Okay. So it is normally when we analyze any basic compound, so silanol groups reacts with that thing. Okay. As it is a Lewis acid, so it reacts with that thing. And when it reacts with that thing, so there will be a bonding. So normally for basic molecules, we see that there is a bonding between the stationary phase and the component. So normally in that thing, we get this kind of tailing peaks. So we need to improvise that. I will say how this can be recovered also. I will tell you in later webinars, okay, in method development, how to do all these things. So next is SN ratio. This is also very important, SN ratio. Okay. This also your system calculates, no need to worry of that. So you just remember the term SN ratio. It is signal to noise ratio. Suppose there is a noise, there is in detector, there is always a noise, okay, in your baseline. Okay, there will be minute noise will be there. If you are using organic solvents more, there will be more noise. Okay, the noise comes, okay, due to your absorbance of the mobile phases. Okay, so there will be some certain kind of absorbance of your mobile phase. Okay, that mobile phase absorbance comes in the form of noise. Okay, so this also we need to monitor that the noise should be minimum. Okay, so to reduce the noise, normally we use degasser, as I have talked previously. Degasser, the use of that to reduce the noise. Also, we need to sonicate our mobile phase more to reduce the noise. Okay, so there are many parameters which we will be doing to reduce the noise. So the peak, this is the peak. Okay, so when SN ratio is the signal to noise ratio, this is the signal to the noise, this noise ratio. So how we will calculate this thing? This is 2h by h. This is the peak height. Okay, so this peak height, 2 times the peak height divided by the highest point of this noise and the lowest point of this noise. Like you can see over here that this is the height h. So if we will draw 2 lines, so this is the, in this noise you can see this is the point in which, this is the point in which there is the maximum, and this is the point in which that is the minimum. This one is the point where is the minimum. So we can draw a line and we can calculate the h over here. And this distance how we will calculate is greater than 5 times the peak width at half height. So this width into 5, that minutes we can. So this your system calculates automatically. So this just a basic things that you know how we can do that thing. So this is the way how signal to noise ratio. So there are 2 types of signal to noise ratio we need for during analysis. Okay, this is very important. So we'll know that thing in our method development webinar, how the signal to noise ratio will be, how it is important. So second is, in a chromatography, what are the factors that are affecting the behavior of the chromatography? Okay, how we can, what are the factors that is needed? So first one is the composition. What is the composition? Composition means your mobile phase composition. Okay, that creates a great impact. Second is ionic strength of your mobile phase. At what molarity you are prepared. You must be mostly aware of what is molality. Normally, we prepare mobile phase in the form of molarity, molar, millimolar. So the ionic strength is more important. Temperature is also important. So I am not going deep in all these subjects because it will take more time. And this we will cover one by one in our method development webinar, how it creates an impact on that. Just I will go superficially so that you can know what are the terms and how. So while discussing in our next webinar, we can you can just recall that yes, this is this, this is this. So temperature is also plays a very important role. Temperature means your column temperature. The column stationary phase is kept in a column oven. Okay, that column oven temperature need to be maintained. Okay, so that temperature plays a very important role, and the pH of the mobile phase. Okay, and also we can, the flow rate also creates an impact. The column dimensions, column temperature, pressure, and your stationary phase characteristics. Okay, that is particle size, porosity, specific surface area. Okay, then also in end capping, carbon loading. So this end capping and carbon loading of stationary phases, I will tell you in a new webinar where we will put up only on stationary phases columns. So what are the different types of columns, how we can use, what columns to use where. So we can do that thing there. So just you know about the terms end capping and carbon loading. These are you will be frequently known about these things. End capping and carbon loading will be in QC and all these analytical labs. So next thing is system suitability. So this is a very important parameter. Everyone in the industry, when you will enter, everyone will say that the system suit is not passing. The system suit means the short term of system suitability. System suit is not passing. System suit is not. What is system suit? So system suitability is the verification of your chromatographic system. Is your chromatographic system perfectly okay or not? Okay, that is used for analysis. Suppose when you are using the system suite means chromatographic system, you are getting a retention time of, when you are injecting the first injection, you are getting a retention time of your peak as 5 minutes. In the second injection, when you are getting the retention time comes to 3 minutes. In the third injection, when the retention time to 6 minutes. So this indicates that your system is not okay. Your chromatographic system is in problem. So there our system suitability will not pass, because we will calculate the retention time RSD of the retention times. So that should be below 2. The limit is 2. RSD means relative standard deviation of the components. So this is what we call the system verification will do. Okay, so what are the concepts behind system suitability? That is our equipment, our electronics, our analytical operations, means our whatever mobile phases we are preparing, that thing, and samples. Okay, these all are prepared well or not. Okay, and this must be checked at the beginning only, because at the later stage we cannot do anything. Okay, this we have to stay check, then only we can proceed the analysis if our system suit is passing. So system suit parameters, there are many parameters of system suit. The first one is the theoretical plates. I will tell you later what are the theoretical plates, how much it should be. Okay, I will come to you with the system suit parameters, what are the parameters. Second is, so essential factors, mobile phase. I have already discussed about mobile phase, that is normal phase and reverse phase mobile phases. Normal phase, that is non-polar solvents, that is N-hexane, heptane, chloroform, isopropyl alcohol. Okay, and this MTB, that is terbiethyl methyl ether, dichloromethane. So these all are normal phase reagents mostly used. Okay, and reverse phase reagents are polar and mid-polar solvents like buffers. Buffer is aqueous, so this is made of water, and acetonitrile, methanol, acidic and basic modifiers like acidic modifiers like TFA, trifluoroacetic acid, trichloroacetic acid. Okay, then we can go for basic modifiers like your triethylamine, diethylamine. Okay, and ammonia. So these are all basic modifiers. We are mostly used in reverse phase chromatography to adjust the pH. Okay. So why we are using buffers? So why a buffer is needed? So just I have written all these things like our mobile phase contains the analyte. Okay, the analyte may be ionizable as well as non-ionizable. Okay, so we have to analyze the analyte in ionized form as well as non-ionized form. So what is ionized form and what is non-ionized form? So you basically know about sodium chloride, NaCl, Na plus Cl minus. So that is the ionized form. Okay, so unionized form is NaCl. So either we have to do it in either we have to do the chromatography in ionized form or unionized form. Normally, if we are going for pH and all, so there is a question here.
Yeah,
Could you?
Mr. Anil is asking, could you please explain in brief why do we use modifiers
Yeah, yeah,
like
sure.
TEA,
Uh,
TFA, etc.?
yeah, I'm coming to that. So, so first, basically, you understand why we are using ionization and unionization. Why you are using that form? Because we are dealing with the pK of the analyte. pK means dissociation constant of the analyte. Okay, you have heard of the term about pKa. Okay, so pK is the dissociation constant of the analyte. Okay, so at the pK, okay, the dissociation will be 50%. Okay, at the pH. Okay, at when pH is equal to pK, the dissociation will be 50%. So there will be half ionized, the analyte will be half ionized and half unionized form. So if we are using in that pH, if you are using the analyte, okay, if you are using the buffers at that pH, then what will happen? There will be split peaks will be observed. Okay, so there will be split peak observed. It's because we have to analyze the analyte in ionized form as well as non-ionized form. Okay, so either in ionized form, if you are mostly we are using ionized form because we ionize the analyte and using in ionized form for basic molecules, because because for if you are taking basic molecules for in a unionized state, then you have to go a pH of higher. Okay, our silica stationary phase that works in an operating range of 2 to 8 normally, and whatever modifications we are doing with silica, like we are using C18 chain like carbon C18 stationary phase or anything, mostly manufacturers they make at 2 to 8 pH only, because after that the silica dissolves. Okay, so silica as a we can work with 2 to 8 pH only, means silica after modifying with carbon 18 chain. Okay, if we are using the plain silica, normal plain silica column, that will be for normal phase, then we cannot use water there, because in water it will dissolve. Okay, so specifically for normal phase we are using silica, means we will use 100%, or we can use maximum to maximum 5% aqueous in that, or means water in that. Otherwise we have to use non-polar solvents only. So here also what happens in basic stage, if you are taking, then in basic the pH will be higher side, means after 7 to 14. Okay, so in that stage if you are using, then there will be impact on your stationary phase, and with that impact you will lose your chromatography. So basically we use basic molecules in an ionized state, whereas acidic molecule in an unionized state. Okay, so it's because so buffers are necessary to maintain the pH. Okay, at that point, that there is, if slightly there will be difference in the ionization of all things, that buffer will keep it fixed in that. So also there will be separation, there will be enhancement in the separation. Okay, so which buffer to use? So here I will come about that TFA and TEA, why acidic modifiers are used. So which buffer to use and when? So first what you have to do, you have to identify the pK of the analyte. Okay, first you have to identify what is the dissociation constant of the analyte. Okay, then you have to prepare the buffer accordingly. pH should be plus minus 2 unit away. Okay, pH should be plus minus 2 unit away. Okay, I'll come with that, Mr. Anil. I will come to this point. Okay, so when where you have to prepare the buffer in which the pH will be plus minus 2 unit away from the pK of the analyte of interest. Okay, so suppose your pK of the analyte is 5. Okay, so you have to prepare a buffer whose pH will be about 3 or 4. Okay, plus minus 2 unit means 3. Okay, normally people take plus minus 1 unit, but as close as you will go to the pK, there will be split peaks observed, and also there will be change in your retention also. Like for benzoic acid analysis, if you are doing benzoic acid analysis, at that point you will see the impact of this pH on the separations. So basically we keep as far as away from the pH, as far away from the pK of the analyte. So here we are using plus minus 2 units. Basically this is a thumb rule, you can put it that plus minus 2 units I will keep away. Normally for acidic it's okay, like if your the molecule is 5 pH, then you can keep it at 3, or you can keep it at 2, you can do it. But if the molecule is having, suppose you take the molecule as 9, the pHs of the molecule is 9, the pK of the molecule is 9. So how you will prepare the buffer? So you will prefer not away, like 11 you will not prepare the buffer pH. You have to prepare the pH down 2 units. It's because that if you will go for 11 pH, no doubt the separation will be good, the retention will be good, but the peak shape will go, okay, and the peak shape will be broad, okay, as well as your column stationary phase will be of great impact, because at 11 pH very means lack of sustainability of your stationary phases. So now there are hybrid columns are also used, though, which can withstand a pH of around 12, okay, 1 to 12. They have a limit of around 1 to 12 pH. They can sustain that thing, but it's advisable to use at a pH lower than 8 in buffers. Very critical molecules like azithromycin molecule is there. Very critical molecule, we can go the pH higher side, like 8.9 or 9. Okay, so there, and there are different types of buffers, like phosphate buffer, acetate buffer, citrate buffer. So these are the pK I have given of this buffer, because within this range it works fine. Normally we use phosphate buffers. Why phosphate buffers are mostly used? It is because it is having 3 pKs. So it will give a working range, 3 working ranges. So in that you can see that this buffer will work at a pH range of 1.1 to 3.1, 6.2 to 8.2, 11.3 to 13.3. So this is not widely used, like 11.3 to 13.3. So normally these two ranges are used. So you can see there is a gap, like 1.1 to 3.1, but after 3.1, what buffer to use with that? So we can come to acetate buffer. So this bridges the gap, like 3.8 to 5.8, it will bridge the gap. So when you require the pH range from 3.8 to 5.8, you can use acetate buffer. Same, you can use citrate buffer also, but citrate buffer are less used because it reacts with the column, and the column life decreases. Because of that, the stationary phase life decreases. So we are not using mostly citrate buffers. It's very critical, means very specific cases we are using. This format buffer also you can use. So this ammonium acetate or ammonium format, that same you can use here. Bicarbonate buffers are also less frequently used. Okay, this gap is maintained by your phosphate. Okay, your borate buffer or ammonia, normally we don't use borate buffer much, we use ammonia buffer here, because ammonia is means not very corrosive to the column, so we can use it at a very percentage of around 0.25% maximum. So TFA and OPA, so trifluoroacetic acid. So if you are working with a pH of 2 range, you can use trifluoroacetic acid plain as a buffer also. OPA also can be used as a plain as a phosphate buffer also. OPA means orthophosphoric acid. And formic acid also you can use as a buffer. And this one also, this is trihydroxymethylaminoethane. This also maintains the range of that. These are basic types of buffer. So coming back to the question that how this could you please explain in brief why do you use modifiers? Okay, so triethylamine, this is a basic modifier, and TFA, trifluoroacetic acid, is an acidic modifier. So these are used as an ion pairing reagent. I have not used ion pairing word anywhere here. So what happens that it increases the peak shape. Okay, suppose your peak shape is not good. So in TEA and TFA, this increases the peak shape. Also TFA as an acidic modifier you can use if you are going for any pH of around 2 or 2.5, you are preparing any buffer of pH 2 or 1.5 or 1.8, so you can go with TFA. Okay, 1.9 you can go with TFA, because that is well compatible with your column. Okay, and also it can withstand the pH, buffer pH. It can enhance the pH of the buffer, means buffer capacity. What I mean to say, it will enhance the buffer capacity. And TE also improves the peak shape of basic molecules. Okay, it improves the peak shape. And so if in case TEA acts as a competent base to improve the elution and avoid strong affinity, yeah, it's used some in basic stage. It acts as a ion pairing reagent. Okay, so it will bind with the analyte, bind with the stationary phase, and it will act as a base to improve the elution, right? So the peak shape will be very sharp, when we are using TEA in the mobile phases. Okay.
So Anil, are you clear with this answer? Any other query?
Yes, sir. It is clear, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So what should be the buffer concentration? So how much you have to use the buffer? So normally we use a optimal range millimolar to 10 millimolar. Okay. But if at all we need our buffer capacity to be more, so we go for 2 millimolar to 50 millimolar, not more than that. In most cases, I have seen also in many cases they have taken for 100 millimolar also, but that is not a suitable thing. It's for specific molecule only they will take to such high limits of buffer, because when you are putting organic phase in your mobile phase, or such high concentration of buffer will precipitate in your stationary phases or in your system, then that will be a great damage to your system and your stationary phase also. So we use an optimum range of 10 to 20 millimolar. Okay. So there will be a relation between pH and retention. So just you can go through the graph that if your acidic molecule, if you are keeping the pH as acidic, then the retention will increase. Same for basic. If you are keeping the pH at basic, the retention of bases will be increased. Okay. So this graph says about that. Then stationary phases. So there are stainless steel columns and peak columns. This will complete in our next webinar, in which we will clear only of stationary phases. So normal phases, stationary phases are these peak columns these are all for ion chromatography. These columns are currently used because these are not hazardous, and also they are not reactive. This column is because so in ion chromatography you use peak column. So normal phase like silica, diol, cyano, amino, chiral phases, these all are normal phase columns. Reverse phase you can see C18, C30, C8, C4, these all are of the reverse phase. Then there are silicas. Normally there are 3 types of silicas. Normally we use type B silica only. Type B and type C are now here used in chromatography currently. Type A silica are previously silicas, irregular silicas, and type B are regular spherical silicas. They are hybrid silicas, synthesized silicas, and type C is fused silicas. Okay. So what are the elution technique? So how we can elute the molecule? So there are 2 types of elutions, that is isocratic elutions and gradient elutions. So what are isocratic elutions? Isocratic elutions are the elution, the composition and the time remains the same. Okay. But in gradient elution, the composition and the time, the composition changes with time. Okay. So that is called gradient elution. So this is a typical chromatography conditions you will find in every STP in the analytical labs and companies. So normally you will find column dimensions written like this. So 250, 4.65 micron, this will be a commonly heard thing. So you will hear this thing like 250, 4.65 micron. It means that 250 is the length of the column, 250 mm. 4.6 mm is the internal dia of the column. Okay, and particle size is the 5 micron. So particle size can range up to 10 micron, 20 micron also. But in HPLC we use up to above 3 micron, 3 micron, 5 micron, 10 micron. But below that in UPLC we use 1.8 micron, 1.7 micron, 2.7 micron. They are all used in UPLC. Okay, so this is a column dimension. Flow rate is you can see flow rate, injection volume. Normally use 10 microliter causing overloading. We are not causing overloading there. So 10 microliter. Detection wavelength 230. There's this range from 200 to 400. So column oven temperature, sample tray temperature in which your sample is kept to keep the stability of the sample. So we use a low degree, and runtime. Runtime means the complete analysis run. How many minutes you want to run. Suppose if it is coming at 5 minutes, so you can maximum your runtime can be 10 minutes. You can put it of which any peaks are eluting. Okay. So this is an analytical column. You can see this is the ID. You can see the internal diameter. This is okay. So this is analytical and this is preparative. So preparative length can be about 500 mm also. ID can be about 50 mm. These are all preparative. Analytical scale, the mm will be around 10 mm, 20 mm like that. Okay. Sorry, 4.6 mm, 3 mm, 4 mm like that. And for preparative, it will after 10 mm, it will go for preparative. Okay. So this is a typical HPLC column. Okay. So from here, it will be, you can see here the flow direction. Okay, in this flow, this direction, the mobile phase should flow. So here is the inlet and here is the outlet. So this will go to the detector. So this is the column dimension. It is written. See, you can read it. Jorbax RX C8. C8 is the stationary phase code. So this is Jorbax. 5 micron is the particle size. Here you can see that 2.1 into 150 mm. So 150 mm is the length of this column, and 2.1 is the ID of this column, internal diameter. Okay. So these are all part number, lot number, and serial number. It is written here. So this is end fitting, and this is the nut. So this is a typical column. And then sample preparation. So sample preparation, how you will do? So mostly we prepare the samples in the element only, in the mobile phase only. So we have to prepare the sample in the mobile phase maximum time. If required, if our sample is not dissolved in our mobile phase, then we can use any other solvents like methanol, acetonitrile as a addition to our mobile phase, or water. We can use that thing as a eluent. Or in after the sample is prepared, we have to filter with 0.45 mm nylon or PVDF filter. No, mostly PVDF filter is used to filter the samples. Okay, so PVDF filter you can use, and we can inject that. We can put it in a vial and inject. So I have already discussed about detectors. So there are common types of all types of detectors: ultraviolet, photodiode array, and now 90% of the applications are on UV and PDA detectors. Okay, so this is a typical chromatogram. Okay, what I want to say, show you. So this is a software of Empower. Okay, this is Empower software, water system. So this is a typical chromatogram of 3 compounds. One is uracil, one is ethyl paraben, one is propyl paraben. These are the impurities. These are, I think, the impurities of uracil or ethyl paraben. So these are the injections. You see the injection. We'll talk to later regarding how this will, how many injections are required for compounds. So here the software calculates everything. Only you need to integrate it. Integration will be a different topic. So I'll show you how to integrate all these things. But first we need to know about the peaks. So here you see that this is a uracil peak. Its retention time is 1.2 minutes. So it is coming at RT. I have showed you this is 1.2 minutes. Area is this much. So we have to calculate the, we have to quantify with the area here. Then this is the percentage area. This is not required now for this essay. This is normally essay things. Analysis, I will talk to you regarding that. Height is not required now. Okay, so this is the SN ratio, what we have talked about, that this is the peak SN ratio, and this is the plate count. So normally we go for a plate count of more than 2000 for a good system suitability according to the pharmacopoeias, European pharmacopoeia or USP. So more than 2000. So this pharmacopoeia will not work. This plate count will not work for this molecule. Okay, so your tailing will be, you see 1.3, the tailing should be below 2, and you can see the resolution. So this resolution is from this peak. I told about resolution. So this peak resolution is 1.7. So like that, you can see all the things. So this one is passing 3010 plate count, and here is USP tailing is 1.2, ethyl paraben, and propyl paraben is also passing. It is 1.2, resolution is 6.7. So you can fix any one point as a RRT. Here I have not shown you RRT, retention time. So you can calculate the retention time RRT of uracil. From this, you can put it as, this is as standard propyl paraben. So 1.2 divided by your 3.6, it will be RRT of uracil. Okay, and 2.4 divided by 3.6, it will be the RRT of ethyl paraben, and 3.6 divided by 3.6, that is 1, will be the RRT of propyl paraben. So this is a typical chromatogram you will see. Okay. So common terms that will use. So one person was asking about Gaussian peak. So this is a pure Gaussian peak. Okay, this is a very symmetric peak. So I have shown you the retention time. These are the common terms while interpreting a chromatogram. You will see RT, retention time, area count, plate count. That should be for system suitability more than 2000. Okay. Then tailing factor, it should be less than 2. Okay, and as you can see in the previous chromatogram, it is less than 2. Everything is less than 2. So it's okay. It is passing our system suitability. So resolution should be more than 2. So you can see the resolution. This one, you can ignore this thing because this is the first pick. This is not of use. It is not used. So you can see the resolution of 5.1 from the first pick. So it is passing 3.2, 3.9, 6.7. So these are passing. So resolution should be more than 2. RRT, you have to give percentage area. This for related substances or impurity detection. So this is a Gaussian peak. You can see the tailing of a peak. So this is tailing. This is not symmetry. This is tailing, you can see, and this is fronting. So hope this is clear. Then types of analysis, what do we do? The analysis, like qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis. Mostly in HPLC, we do your quantitative analysis, mostly. So qualitative analysis are chemical tests, flame tests, your spectroscopic like NMR. In IR also, they are doing qualitative analysis. Okay. Quantitative analysis are concentration of the compounds, we measure that thing. That is gravimetric analysis. Volumetric analysis means your titration and all. UV, mass, HPLC, UPLC, etc. So common types of analysis done in pharmaceutical analysis by HPLC, that is assay. Assay is the calculating the content, how much content or how much concentration of the compound is there in our sample. So that is assay. And related substances test or impurity profiling we do. That is the related substances of our compound, means degradation substances of our compound, like isomers, any impurities are there, any process things are there. So we are doing a related substances test. This is highly important for outside market, like US FDA, MHRA, we need to do this thing. In Indian market also we need to do that thing, but not so efficiently. Okay, so degradation studies are also there. We do here stability studies, post dissolution studies. After dissolution, we will put the sample there. Then purification. This is preparative case in purifications. So in purification, we need to separate the compounds, purify the compounds. So we need preparative HPLC for that. So we used to do that thing. So with this, I end this webinar.
So basically, as per our commitment, we are dedicated to provide the best knowledge to our students. And we have already gone through our first batch, in which we got a very good response from the students. And now from 25th July, we are going to start our new course, which will be online. And basically it will be happening during the weekends. And most of the modules that we'll be covering will be relevant to our pharmaceutical industry, including your R&D, your QA, QC. And those courses will be really helpful, especially for those people who want to join the pharmaceutical industry. The modules that we'll be including, such as literature search, pre-formulation studies, RLD characterization, the concept of QBD and its application, which is now a blazing trend. And mostly the equipments which are being used in the pharmaceutical industry, what are its critical process parameters and how it can impact your quality attributes. Introduction about drug product specifications, the justification, and mostly the common terminologies that are being used in the pharmaceutical industry, the concept of bioequivalence, and there are many more to be added for QC, QA, regulatory affairs. So these courses we will be starting from 5th July. You can just join us from home. You can take the advantage to learn from home, and the course will start from 25th July. So now I will be sharing the feedback form so that you guys can just fill up the feedback form, and based on the feedback form, we will be circulating the certificates, and request you to please give your unbiased feedback so that we can know that where should we improve and which things you liked about us. So I am sharing you the feedback.